How you doing? Mike McGroarty from freeplants.com and Mike's Backyard Nursery.com. This video, I want to talk to you about transplanting, and what I'm trying to convey to you is when it's safe to transplant and when it's not safe to transplant. I'm out here at the nursery standing. This is an Ornito Nishiki Japanese maple. We're getting near the end of the growing season, but this is just incredible, the colors on this plant. Now, typically the transplanting season, especially for a deciduous plant like this, deciduous meaning a plant that is not an evergreen, a plant that loses its leaves during the winter months is deciduous. A deciduous plant like this, and typically it's a good idea to follow this rule for everything, but we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. You can't transplant something like this when it has leaves on it, and that's a mistake that people make, and they often get confused. So it's a good idea to kind of draw yourself a gardening schedule of what you want to do and when you want to do it. And any transplanting that you want to do, the moving of something from one place to another in your yard, you want to do it during the season when the plant is not dormant. It's October 30th here in northern Ohio. We've had about 2 pretty heavy frosts here, but a frost is not enough to knock these leaves off. Now, when we get a freeze, probably sometime in the next 2 weeks, where the temperature drops down below 32 degrees, down around into the high 20s, and stays there for a few hours, that's going to completely freeze this plant, and that triggers dormancy. Once that happens, the plant knows that the growing season is over, it drops its leaves, and it goes into a resting period. And I like to liken that to a human being when we're doing surgery, because when you transplant this plant, you're going to cut some roots, and when you cut those roots, when this plant is actively growing, you will shock the plant. It's like a human being being injured, or somebody going into surgery and not being put to sleep. I mean, when they do surgery on us, they take us down into a very deep sleep type resting period, which is similar to the dormancy of plants. And then they can do all kinds of things. They can take your knee joint out, or take a broken arm and break it and re-break it. It's crazy. And you wake up and you're in pain, but you're not in shock. Same thing for the plant. So anytime you're going to do that kind of severe root pruning, which is what happens when you transplant a plant, then you're going to have to wait until the plant is completely dormant. So usually here in Ohio, that happens somewhere around the 15th of November, and then the plants will remain dormant until early to mid-spring. And once they start putting on leaves in the spring, you can't dig them. If there's just buds there, you can get away with it. But once the leaves open up, the digging season is over, and it's over until November. So that's the key with transplanting. Now, don't confuse transplanting with planting. When you're planting a plant, something out of a container or something that might be in a balled in burlap that you bought at the nursery, that's not transplanting, because all of the transplantation was done before you got the plant. This plant is in a container, and it's very well root bound, so you're going to take this out of the container. In most cases, you might want to disturb some of these roots on the outside a little bit when you plant it. That's always a good idea, but you're not going to do severe root damage. So you're going to dig a hole and put this in. There's no shock. And a lot of people say, oh boy, don't plant during the summer months. Well, I disagree with that, because I'd much rather see a plant in the ground during the summer months rather than sitting on the top of the ground with the sun beating on this black container and just extracting all the moisture out of it. So planting is very different than transplanting, and that's why in the nursery business we do all of our digging in the late winter, early spring, and then as soon as the plants leaf out, we quit digging. And we don't start digging again until November 15th. But between April 15th and November 15th, we can sell any plant that we have dug in a container, in a ball, and you can take it home and plant it. So I hope that makes sense. Now, evergreens, things like taxus, juniper, arborvitae, they're a little bit different. You definitely don't want to transplant them in the spring once they start growing, because you very well could kill them. But by the end of August or so, all that growth is hardened off, and some evergreens can be transplanted then, but ideally you're better off to wait until November. That way you know for sure. So transplanting season starts as soon as you get a good hard freeze, and it continues until it starts to warm up in the spring and the plants make leaves. So I hope that makes sense to you.